Hello guys, welcome back to Clinically Clear. So today let's finally at least clear something that's clinically relevant in community medicine, that is disaster and disaster management. So how do we define a disaster? Any occurrence, any event, any incidence that causes three things: ecological disruption, economic disruption, and deterioration of health and health services. So let's say there's a flood, the ecology is disrupted, the economy is cooked, and the health people die. Health services, hospitals are not able to function like they used to. But not any event like this is not considered. It should be on a scale that is sufficient enough, large enough to warrant a response from the government. It should be a large response, should be something considerably big. Then it becomes a disaster. Disaster and hazard are not the same. Hazard is something that has the potential to cause damage. Okay, so disaster risk, quantifying the chances of disaster occurring, is disaster risk, which is hazard into vulnerability factor. So more the vulnerability factor, this potential of the hazard causing damage, causing the disruption, causing disaster goes on increasing. So that is how we quantify the risk of a disaster occurring. So what are all the types of disaster? You can have man-made disaster, natural disasters. Of course, more common ones are natural disasters. Under natural disaster, most common are hydrological, floods. We keep hearing about floods left and right. Floods are the most common, most fatal. Hydrological. You can also have geological, earthquake, you can have avalanches, you can have landslides, various things. Man-made disasters can be chemical disasters like Chernobyl nuclear disaster, Bhopal gas tragedy, can be biological disasters such as COVID pandemic, plague pandemic, influenza, flu pandemics. All these are types classification. Just these are all common sense. You don't have to break your head too much. Then you have levels of disaster: L0, 1, 2, 3. 0 is no disaster. 1 is mild disaster. Mild disaster requires district level of response. Now, this district authority is the nodal authority in disaster response. Important question. The district is responsible as a nodal authority. And moderate level of disaster management, L2 requires state level, L3 is severe disasters where you require national response, international response. What is NDRF, NADM, NIDM, all that I'll come to later. Now the most important part of the topic, that is disaster cycle. So you have disaster impact first, the disaster occurs, boom. Then the most crucial phase, the most important phase, disaster response. You have to save the people, respond to the disaster response. Then you have the longest phase, rehabilitation or recovery phase, where you have to bring it back to normal eventually. Then vulnerability assessment will assess how vulnerable it is to undergo another disaster impact. Then you have mitigation. What is mitigation? I'll come to soon. And you have disaster preparedness, where you will prepare for the next disaster. So this is the disaster cycle 5-star question. Pakka it will come. Either as a 3 marker or 5 marker. Then you have disaster. First, let's go to disaster response phase. That is the most crucial phase. Okay. Here the main aim is search and rescue. Okay. You can further divide it into primary, secondary, and tertiary. 0 to 6 hours, primary. 6 hours to 24 hours, secondary. 1 day to 60 days, tertiary phase. First 6 hours after the disaster occurs, the goal is survival. We find, search and rescue the survivors, as much survival rate as possible. How do we achieve this? Through triage. What is triage? I'll come to soon. Basically, start strategy. Strategy is start triage and rapid treatment so that you can make as many people survive as possible. That is in primary phase. Secondary phase, the goal is to prevent spread of communicable diseases, infections. When there's a flood, think about it. Infections are just going to go spread everywhere. So most common infection during a disaster that spreads is acute gastroenteritis. The most common zoonotic disease is leptospirosis. So to prevent the spread of these communicable diseases, we need to have clean water, hygienic drinking water. We need to have good sanitation. people shouldn't be urinating into the flood water, into the feces, into the flood water, then it will spread even more, right? So that is about secondary phase. Tertiary phase, the goal is to, clean up. And here, through water, vaccine, everything you will do. To what you do in tertiary phase is basically tertiary phase of disaster response phase is the events, what you do, the basically the steps are the same as rehabilitation phase or recovery phase. So I'll come to that later. So triage, what is triage? The categorization of injured based on severity of injury and the likelihood of survival with medical intervention. If you only write severity of injury, it becomes wrong, because someone who's almost dead, very severe injury, they won't get priority treatment in triage. So, and one more important thing is, when there is an emergency, when there is a disaster, first come first serve is never ever, it is never applicable. So you will categorize based on severity of injury and based on likelihood of survival. Then you will tag the patient. Like, you go to a disaster, you go to some place where there's been a train accident. You'll tag each and every patient there. The tag will have a color code. It will have the age, any identification, any disease that you've diagnosed, and the treatment. So you have category 1, color red, highest priority, where they require immediate medical intervention. They need to be shifted to the OT, or they need to be shifted to the OT within 6 hours. They need to be transported to the hospital. Example, pneumothorax, cardiac tamponade, where otherwise in 30 to 60 minutes they'll die. Within 1 hour they'll die if you don't give medical intervention. But if you give medical intervention, you can save that person. Example is pneumothorax. Okay. Next is category 2, medium priority, yellow. They are stable, but they still have a serious injury like fractures. Okay. So we'll keep them under observation. Category 3, that is low priority. They have injuries, they have lacerations, they have abrasions, they have contusions, a lot of superficial injuries, but they're able to walk. So you don't have to treat them immediately. That is category 3. Category 4, no priority. You have to leave the body alone. Dead patients or moribund patients, they're almost about to die. It's a waste of time to give medical intervention, because in that time you can save so many other category 1 patients. So that these are moribund patients. Example, severe head injury, severe burns, 95% surface burns, 3rd-degree burns, all that. Category 4, black, no priority. Then there are, usually according to triage, normal standard triage, red gets treated first. But in wars, when there is bed shortage in emergencies, let's say there's a train accident near a hospital, 800 patients, injured patients are now coming. So now they're coming. You don't have enough beds in your hospital. What will you do? You'll treat the green patients and you'll send them home immediately. Reverse triage is known as scourge triage. When there's a bed shortage, is known as scourge triage. Or in wars, where we need as many soldiers as possible. So if you treat category 1 patients first, they won't be fit to fight in the war. But category 3 patients, suture their laceration, send them back to the war, they'll fight. So soldiers are needed. So that is when you do reverse triage. Understood? So triage is what you do in primary phase of disaster response phase. It is the most crucial. Now, as I was telling, tertiary phase of disaster response phase and rehabilitation phase, they are basically the same. So what all do you need? You need clean water. One water supply source for every 250 people, and the water should be at least 0.7 parts per million chlorinated for it to be called hygienic. Sanitation, one latrine for 20 people. Vector control, malathion spray, so that mosquito control, malathion spray. If there's a flood, of course it's a breeding ground for mosquitoes. Vaccination, very important thing, you will not vaccinate everybody. See, there's a flood, your aim is to save as many people, prevent diseases, prevent the spread of infections. You're not going to go vaccinating each and every person. But children, you have to do measles. Measles vaccination is very important in disasters, natural disasters or man-made disasters. And people, frontline workers like NDRF, National Disaster Response Force, army workers, who are going through that water, who are lifting people up from stuck positions, they're basically frontline workers. For them, tetanus vaccine, hepatitis B can be given. Okay, then adequate shelter. Shelter, 300 square foot shelter minimum. The shelter has to have 300 square foot and 40 square foot per person. Okay. So what all? Shelter, sanitation, water, vector control, and vaccination. And remember, you can give food supplies as well, of course, so that malnutrition does not happen after a famine, after a drought, after a flood. Also, most common long-term problem is malnutrition. And the most common vitamin deficiency of disasters is vitamin A. So vitamin A supplementation. So these are some other things. So this is with respect to rehabilitation phase, also the tertiary phase of disaster response phase. Next, coming to mitigation. See, mitigation is everything to do with laws, administrative work, legal work, planning, and acts, measures to reduce the impact of disaster. Next time there's a disaster, the impact should reduce. Example, fire safety norms. Certain fire safety norms. Every floor should have a fire extinguisher so that next time there's a fire, extinguished. Construction norms. Buildings can be constructed only up to 3 floors, or you should have so many so and so pillars, so and so beams, so that it does not immediately fold and fall upon an earthquake. That is mitigation. Okay, so mitigation is to do with administrative measures to reduce the impact of the disasters. Whereas disaster preparedness, preparing for a disaster, the last step, to know what to do during a disaster. Okay, capacity building, we're building up the capacity, we're collecting the resources, we're keeping them available, we're making a warning system. There's a tsunami approaching somewhere, immediately all the people along the coastline, they'll get a message, oh, tsunami warning system. Mock drills, disaster simulation exercises, so that the public can know what to do during a disaster next time. Educational workshops, all these are disaster preparedness. Disaster preparedness is preparing for the next disaster, to know what to do during that disaster. Mitigation is how to reduce the impact, administrative measures to reduce the impact of the next disaster. Now, some national forums, not forums actually, panels or platforms to manage disasters. You have National Institute of Disaster Management, NIDM, under Home Affairs Ministry. So the chief is Union Home Minister. National Disaster Management Authority, NDMA, chief is Prime Minister of India. And the most important, nowadays, the most important is the NDRF. They are the ones who actually come. Prime Minister won't come and save you from the flood. The NDRF, National Disaster Response Force, the battalions, Border Security Force, Central Reserve Police Force, they all comprise the NDRF. They are the ones who, get in the water, go underneath the rubble and save people. These are the national forums. International forums, you have something known as the Sendai framework, which is a United Nations framework for disaster risk reduction. So they'll reduce, the aim is to reduce, generic shit, to reduce the disaster risk, to invest in disaster risk reduction, to understand disaster risk, to enhance disaster preparedness, all basic stuff. So this is about disaster management. I hope you guys understood. If you have any doubts, please let me know in the comment section. Thank you for watching.